Actually, I'm not sure I know the answer to that question. I don't know if Steve, you or Jim, when you've been over there, have any discussions. The only thing I am aware is that I know that they're doing a lot of research on recycling. I think that they have also entered into, and correct me, Mike, if I'm wrong, entered into a cooperative agreement with Areva on looking at recycling. So I think that they're looking, if they're going to expand to the amount of generating plants that they're talking, which is enormous. I think they're looking at a program like the French have where they're going to recycle the used fuel, get more energy out of it, and then ultimately they'll go to a deep geologic repository for their byproduct waste.
A question for Steve. Do you have any examples of lessons learned in China and how that's changed what you've done here or will do here?
Yeah, we have a couple of lessons learned, and when you say Steve, you're really talking to Jim and Steve because our projects are basically the same. The modular assembly building that you saw under construction at our place and just about finished on Jim's slides came from the Chinese. If you looked at the slides Jim showed of the overlay of the site, there is no such facility at either of the Chinese projects. When they started to construct the modules, they let us know that if we could do them in a vertical fashion and indoors, it would save a lot of time and effort. Basically, they built theirs in a horizontal fashion and then uprighted them before they picked them with a big crane. That uprighting process puts a lot of stress and strain on the welds and the bolting that you've just done. So in order to alleviate that stress and strain, if you can build them in the vertical position to start with, you're much further ahead on the game. So that building and that process is a lesson learned from China. We also got a lot of lessons learned on that lower bowl. Jim showed you some pictures of the lower bowl. The fit up of that process was very difficult. And so we've had the folks from Chicago Bridge and Iron in contact with the folks from Shaw that were helping with the Chinese project, and we think our fit up will go much faster than their fit up did on those 58 plates that Jim talked about.
Thanks. Thank you, Steve. Other questions? Cole? Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. I just wondering if you could talk about what the prospects and expectations are for additional loan guarantee authorizations in both the fiscal 2011 and fiscal 2012 federal budgets.
Okay. I think, first of all, we don't expect we're going to see a lot of disciplined appropriation processes in Congress. We expect we're going to see a continuing resolution, which means they just continue stuff without doing a lot of individual appropriation bills. Not only for this year, but we think even for next year. The President is going to announce his budget proposals next Monday, I think. And we expect there's going to be a significant amount of loan volume in his proposal. We have very strong support from the appropriators and from a lot of authorizers for loan guarantees. So we expect we're going to get loan guarantees as part of the President's budget, but then we're really expecting we're going to get it as part of a continuing resolution. The challenge that we have, and I mentioned it in my comments, is that on Capitol Hill right now, everybody is appropriately, sometimes not accurately, but appropriately focused on what you can do about deficit reduction and more discipline. And sometimes that results in just cutting stuff. Loan guarantees are perceived as a subsidy. That's really wrong, because you actually pay for them. So it's a revenue generator. So one of the challenges is to change the perception to factually reflect the fact that we pay for it. And then the other thing that's important on loan guarantees is it actually reduces the cost to your customers, as you heard from Jim when he talked. And for merchants, it has a significant impact on the cost of the plants because I can leverage a lot more. So part of the challenge is getting them educated up there, but we are reasonably, I use cautiously optimistic, but I think that we are going to be very aggressive in trying to get more loan volume in 2011 this year. And to 2012, it's going to be exactly the same story. We'll get it in appropriation bills, but then it'll be another continuing resolution, and it'll be another battle on that. So the answer is we're going to get what we need, though it's not going to be easy.
One of the benefits of the COL process was perceived to be the the lack or the lack of opportunity for continued opposition of one kind or another from various sources, that there's only one shot, in effect, that can take place. I wondered how that's worked so far. Has there been any concerted effort to oppose the issuance of the COL? Jim, you're first up in that case. And beyond that, are there other what could go wrongs that we ought to be looking for in the years ahead?
I'll let Jim and Steve comment, then I'll comment.
Yeah, Carl, we have had interveners in both our COL and our early site permit. They've raised issues ranging from aquatic issues on the Savannah River, coding issues of the Westinghouse design. In each case, we've been successful, and they have had their intervention dismissed. The COL process does have extensive public involvement, still has yet another round to go, but the principal key point that comes out of it is you resolve these safety issues in advance of construction. So you know we're going to build the AP 1000 in accordance with this design certification document, and that's it. Once we build it in accordance with that and the inspections, test, and analysis, when we're concluded, we can go commercial. Not the old two-step process. Some may not know that. First round we're built, you got a construction license, spent your money, then you went back and asked for an operation license. And that proved to be unwieldy, and that has been cured in this COL process. But we have had interveners, and you know what they do in the future we don't know, but we think the licensing process is working well.
Steve?
Me too. Yeah, I would echo what Jim said. The only thing I might add is that we had intervention at the state level, intervention at the federal level. All of that has been dispositioned, and that currently both the Southern Project and the SCE&G project have uncontested hearings at the federal level. So what we're anticipating is roughly a 4-month federal hearing process, but there is no intervention in that process. Going forward, what we would really like to see for the next round of plants is that if you don't have any intervention, that those uncontested hearings would be pointless, and we really don't need to have those. But right now, as Jim pointed out, all the intervention has been dispositioned, and we will have hearings, but they'll be uncontested hearings.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, and I think we all commented that we think the process is working pretty well. It's obviously taking longer than any of us would like, but it's the first time through for everybody. We're not in necessarily the orderly way that it was designed, which would have liked to have a design certification on the shelf and a bank site, and you come in with your COL and you basically go through. We're doing a lot in parallel here with design certs out of necessity. So what we're seeing is about a 10-year time period for our first folks going through. And I think NRC's learning, we're learning, it's basically working. Steve actually chairs our working group that lives and dies on all the regulatory issues, so he's actually very, very up to speed on everything, not just from experience at the site, but also in working with the NRC. We actually expect that time to market can go from the 10 years or so right now down to 6 or 7 years if we stay standardized, if we bank sites, and if NRC does what they can do. We think the licensing process actually goes to about 50% in time of what it is now, and is driven more by NEPA, not the safety reviews, because they're fundamentally done. So we see a big benefit going forward. We're still learning. There's going to be bumps in the road as we go through construction, and the NRC looks at building a new plant now, and particularly one that has a, quote, an operating license. You have no radioactive material on site, but you have an operating license, and they have an operating license mentality, and there's a learning for us and them on that as we go through it. But overall, it's working really very well from the experience we've had to date. Everybody's working to make it better. Other questions?
Can you talk a little about the economics of new nuclear and how you see that in this apparently new era of limitless quantities of cheap shale gas and no sign of carbon legislation anywhere on the horizon?
Yeah, I think I touched on it there. Companies that are in regulated environments have the benefit of taking a long-term perspective if their Public Utility Commission is willing to do that, as we're seeing in Georgia and South Carolina. And I think once you take a long-term perspective, you want to do things like diversify your portfolio, as Steve showed you. And when you look at a nuclear plant over a 40 or 60-year life, it becomes a very desirable economic investment. Merchants have it much tougher. They got to do some forward forecasting on where they think gas prices are going to be. Steve and I said basically the same thing. There's obviously a lot of shale gas. I don't think there's any question about that. But we've always had a lot of gas, one way or another, and you only got to go back about 3 years, and LNG was going to be the savior. Now we're actually looking to actually export shale gas as LNG to other countries. So we look at it and we say, you're going to have a diversified portfolio. And we are going to continue to have environmental requirements imposed, not just on coal plants, but they're going to impose them on gas plants too, and as they go forward over time. We're not going to see climate legislation anytime soon, but you're going to see environmental requirements. So what we think is the long-term situation. Are you going to build nuclear plants for the 2050 timeframe? Absolutely. You're going to build a lot of plants between now and 2050. You're just not going to build a lot of plants between now and 2020. And we think the economics will be easiest in regulated states first because of a view they can take, and then we'll get better at building. And if you take time to market down to 6 years, and you get really efficient at what you're doing from modular construction and everything else, you're going to lower the cost of the plant too, which will have an impact on us getting better. I think gas prices only have one place to go. They have to go up. I'm not saying they're going to go up a lot, but they only have one place they're going to go. And I think our plants probably have only one place they should go if we're smart, and that's lower. So I think for the long term, the economics are good, and I think for the near term, the economics are best in regulated states because of the view they can take. And for merchants, I think that it's harder, but not impossible. Anybody else?
Thanks. What kind of developments can we expect in the area of small modular reactors in 2011? And if the TVA signs actually a contract, would that be considered a turning point in the development there?
Small modular reactors are being very seriously considered. TVA is working with B&W and Empower. Other suppliers are looking at small modular reactors too in our country. The first gate we got to get through is to do a good job of defining the NRC's regulatory requirements. What are your emergency planning requirements for a small modular reactor that has a much smaller source term? What are your requirements for control room staffing? What are the fees you're going to pay? There's a number of things that right now the industry, through NEI, is engaged with the NRC on defining what the regulatory structure will be that the small modular reactors will have to meet. In parallel with that, the suppliers are doing the designs on their small modular reactors and figuring out how they want to design it and how do they maximize the economic benefits of deploying a small modular reactor. The value comes in two things. Can I design it so I have less equipment, less things that cost me money, and can I design it so I can manufacture it relatively quickly and in manufacturing facilities so I don't have to build it mostly, so I cut construction way down. So the designers are working on those. The industry as a whole is working on regulatory requirements, and I think that the DOE is going to be looking to try and support it with a public-private partnership. I think that that's going to be a good thing, but a very difficult thing in the current budget situation on Capitol Hill. So that may be a battle to get. We're right now thinking you don't see small modular reactors deployed in our country in any commercial type way until the 2020 timeframe. So it's not a tomorrow thing, but there's a lot happening tomorrow to try and make 2020 a reality.